So one thing that sort of highlighted itself today, which is very important to pick up on and actually really important to discuss, was during a time in my run, when I got to Rottingdean, I sort of was in that mindset of like, oh, my body is not feeling it today, or like, I'm just not in it. I don't want to run any further, because originally I did plan to run to the marina, which I did in the end. And the problem wasn't that I persisted through that to run to the marina and back. I'm glad in a way that I have done it, but what was quite specific to me was sort of justifying the reason for doing that. So the problem didn't lie within actually doing the distance that I said I was doing, or like changing my mindset and being like, oh, okay, I will do it. It was more to do with why I was pushing myself to do more. And it's a really, really tricky one. Yeah, it's sort of tricky to like, there's a very fine line for me between like having and wanting to do something, and sometimes that line can get a bit blurred. And it was just quite significant today because for me, I wasn't doing that distance for positive reasons, and that's the problem. The problem isn't that, you know, you push through and you do that distance. It's more to do with what thought you're pushing through, if that makes any sense. I probably said that in the most complex way ever, but instead of pushing myself, being like, no, Charlotte, just do it because you've set your mind to do it, you'll feel better for it, having more beneficial, positive mental and physical benefits. Or if I didn't want to push myself because my body was telling me not to, listening to my body and not doing that distance, that's completely different. Yeah, it's completely different to saying, well, if you don't do that distance, then you don't deserve to eat later, or you're not doing much anyway, so like you're a bit of a failure if you don't do it. And just having a really negative association to not doing it, or pushing through, being like, you have to push through because if you don't do what you said you were going to do, then there's going to be negative consequences to that, or self-punishment. In my case, mine's more to do with fueling my body, and again, just having that negative talk with myself, which is not healthy in the slightest. And I think it's something to be so incredibly aware of when you're doing things. And the more you give into that thought, the more habitual it becomes. And unfortunately, that's where we see a lot of like relapse occur, but also, you know, and with other disorders, we don't want them to progressively get worse. But don't ignore it. Definitely don't ignore it. It's been quite insightful for me in a way. I think with everything going on, I think it's easy, or it seems easier to slip back into old patterns. So it's really important to just be aware of it. And yes, I did run to the marina today. So it was sort of a mix between I just couldn't be asked, but also definitely having that sort of thought process, that negative thought process in my mind. And I think it's where, well, I'm going out for dinner tonight, and that was sort of like, well, if you don't do that distance, Charlotte, then whatever you decided to order, because we all look up the menu before, let's be honest, you can't have that. And it's just, yeah, it's the craziest thing, but so significant. And I've sort of taken this in a way that, like, I wanted to do that distance in general because I just wanted to do that earlier, and then it changed, and then when I got there, that was just the immediate thought of that was why I was carrying on, which I felt really sad about because that's not how I want to be living my life. But yeah, but I think it's really important to also highlight the point of not letting that ruin your full day, or like waiting for tomorrow to sort of start again with stuff. It's great to acknowledge it, so write it down if you need to. That way you can sort of track where this has sort of happened, and see how you can sort of positively get yourself back up from that. And for me, I've acknowledged it, whereas before it would definitely be ignorance is bliss sort of thing, and just ignore those behaviours. But it's really important that I don't do that. And so for me, the way I'm going to turn this around is order whatever I was going to have later, because that's what I'm going to do, and just sort of break bad habits quickly. But yeah, I think exercise psychology or psychological response to exercise or addictive behaviour, it's such an important topic that isn't as vocally discussed as other areas to do with exercise and exercise physiology and things like that. But your mind is an incredibly powerful thing. And I think we forget just how powerful it is. So on one hand, it can be absolutely great because it shows that, like, for example, like today, even though my body felt tired, I had this moment where when I was running back, I sort of took my mind to somewhere else. I was making up stories in my head so I could get through my run. And I forgot about what my arms and legs were doing. And I actually had a really good run. So going from that thought of thinking that you can't do it or that your body's to that point, but you actually can, is crazy. But then we've also got the other side of the coin where sort of our bodies are being pushed through our minds, sort of thing, and, you know, utilising exercise in a negative way, and just that negative association and psychological behaviour, or addictive behaviours. So yeah, it's really tricky to balance. I think it's harder than what people think sometimes. And like I said, we do like to ignore things in life, but it's definitely something that we definitely should not be ignoring. So sorry it was a bit long, but I think it's important to share sort of moments like this, especially for myself, but hopefully others can relate too. And just sort of, like I said, write it down, rectify, don't wait for tomorrow, start again today, and